everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be my next recent reads wrap up. So I have books 21 through 27 that I read in May, and then books 1 through 3 that I read so far in June. So I mean, obviously, like I just said, I did read 27 books in May total, and I have two different wrap-ups that I'll try to remember to leave a link down below if you want to see my reviews for the first 20 books that I read in May. I guess before we get into the actual wrap-up, I have a couple things I just want to say real quick. In terms of the Read the Olympics 2020 readathon, that does start on the 14th, so we are less than a week away now, yay. I recently created a Discord group, and you can find that link in the announcement video itself, which I will also try to remember to leave linked in the description. And I've posted about it on Twitter. There's a good number of people already in the Discord group, so that's exciting. And I just want to I think I mentioned this in the announcement video, but I had been planning on doing a live stream chat video on the 14th as an opening ceremony. So I think the plan is to start at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time in the US. And probably be about an hour. So just put that on your radar, I guess. I'll probably try to set it up on YouTube so it will have something available to for you to set a reminder if you want. Like always, we're going to start from the lowest rated to the highest rated. And I will say this is going to be a slightly unusual wrap up for me in that I have, I think, just one fantasy book to talk to you about today. And that is because Legacy of Ash, which you will probably remember, kind of put me into a bit of a fantasy reading slump. So I kind of just went for more mysteries, thrillers, contemporaries of all things. I don't read a whole bunch of contemporary, but I did this time. So yeah, that's a little bit unusual for me. But anyway, we will go ahead and get started. And the first book I'll talk about was a 2-star rating for me, and that's A Divided Loyalty by Charles Todd. So I had an advanced copy of this through a Goodreads giveaway, and this was just meh. Problem 1, this is book 22 in the series. I've never read any of the other books, so I'm sure that kind of affects my enjoyment when I have no idea who any of these characters are, and just, I don't know, have no idea what's really going on. I thought, because these are mysteries, so I kind of assumed that they would be more standalone, but I don't know. So basically, we follow a Scotland Yard detective who is assigned to investigate this chief inspector's murder investigation, because basically this murder investigation wasn't super successful, and so our detective is called in to help identify the victim. The book starts off with our detective investigating another case, and then he's pulled into this particular case. There's not a whole lot of clues to go off of, and it's these clues are pointing him to an impossible solution, one that will draw the wrath of the Yard down on him and likely see him dismissed if he pursues it. So yeah, this was very meh. I don't know, this impossible solution. I was I mean, that's not really impossible. That's exceedingly probable. I didn't like any of the characters. I was bored. The mystery itself was really bland. I was not at all surprised by the reveal. I basically felt it was the only logical conclusion, so the suspense was extremely lacking for me. Throughout the book, our detective is talking to somebody, and I assumed at first that this character that the detective is talking to existed, but now I'm kind of questioning if that person is actually not there and our detective is actually just talking to himself. I'm not really clear, and again, that may just be because this is book 22 and I could have just completely missed all of this build-up with this particular character who may or may not exist, so I don't know. But that was a little bit jarring, because it would be he would be talking to this person, and I was I would completely forget that he was there, and then later on I was is he actually there? I don't know. I don't really have much more to say about this. Didn't particularly enjoy it. I won't be continuing either. So now we're in the 3-star range, and the first book I'll talk about here is Happy and You Know It by Hankin. So I also run an advanced copy of this through a Goodreads giveaway, so that was exciting. This is one of these more contemporary books, I guess. So we have Claire, who is a former member of a now popular band, and she essentially gets a gig as a musician for this play group of really well-off women and their children. She ends up actually really liking all of these mothers, and these mothers are kind of wellness addicts, I guess, and like they're Instagram influencers and things like that. Old money, there's like a new stay-at-home mom, so we've got a variety of mothers in this playgroup. We then have secrets and betrayals uncovered. It definitely took a turn I didn't expect. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I did enjoy many of the characters, Amara in particular, so she's like the new stay-at-home mom. She was pretty entertaining and just like kind of sassy and like stood up for herself, so I definitely thought she was a fun character. And I did enjoy learning throughout the book more about their lives, and just like their backgrounds and trying to get to know everybody. There's definitely a good amount of exploration of social media usage and, you know, like the personas that we present to the world through social media. Like basically, you know, like I guess you kind of like on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, like it seems like people tend to just post like the good things, and it kind of gives us a skewed sense of reality, especially when you're like checking it and be like, oh, everybody else has such a great life, like my life sucks. You know, that's not necessarily true because you're just maybe not seeing the full picture. It's certainly just like the friend group here. It's a very unlikely set of friends, but it works, and I just liked seeing how everybody kind of, you know, just the group dynamics and how everyone wanted to stand up for each other, basically. This was fun. I didn't connect with it as much as one of the other contemporary books that I read. This is a particular set of books that I'll talk about momentarily. I think, you know, parents may connect with this slightly more than I did, but yeah, I mean, if that premise sounds interesting to you, I would say it's worth checking out, certainly. So the other 3-star book I have to talk to you about today is Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. So this is going to come out July 21st this year, and I requested this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, so thank you to the publisher. So basically, this is a sci-fi book. It is set in 2007, and there's basically like this leak that the US government has maybe already had first contact with aliens, and this leak comes from our main character's father. Her father is in hiding, and our main character, Cora, basically wants nothing to do with him. She then, throughout the course of the book, kind of learns just how involved her family is with these aliens and just kind of like the cover-up and everything like that. And she also learns that aliens have in fact been there for a while, and along the way she ends up becoming an interpreter for one of the aliens. She ends up forming a connection with this alien. So this was kind of slow to get into for me. So Cora kind of starts off as a college dropout, and she's really not super motivated to do much in life, and, you know, is kind of ambivalent, I think, about her job, and, you know, has been working as like a temp. So it was a bit slow, but then once the aliens kind of come into place, the story definitely picks up quite a bit. I never really connected with Cora that much. I did find the alien to be the most interesting of all the characters, but I did really enjoy seeing this friendship that develops between Cora and the alien. Throughout the book, we do get to learn more about alien society, like the different types of aliens and this hierarchy of the different types of aliens. And I found that to be pretty interesting, but I definitely got confused at times. There's certainly like a lot of terminology thrown at us, and, you know, names of different aliens, and just like I just kind of struggle a little bit to keep everything straight in my mind. You know, I did really enjoy this focus on interpretation, and I think part of the reason why I was so interested in picking this book up was just like how that kind of this interpretation with aliens premise reminded me a lot of Arrival, and I feel like I preferred Arrival to this, but I still just enjoyed this concept overall. I liked seeing how Cora really tries to just like accurately translate things, but also provide context and kind of like soften what would be like harsh ideas so that, you know, the meaning comes across, but you're not like offending people, basically. I thought that was really cool. And then I thought there was just like a general interesting exploration of like what it means to be human, and kind of how like dominating species or people kind of, you know, end up pressing various beliefs and other societal things on others. There's also a large amount of talk about consent throughout the book, so I thought that was nice. So in terms of the ending, I felt pretty satisfied overall, but as other reviewers on Goodreads have pointed out, it does take a bit of a departure from themes that were like pretty consistent throughout the book. So Yeah, I mean, that's kind of hit or miss, I guess, but overall I was satisfied with it. My main complaints about this was that, the pacing is pretty uneven at times. Like, I mentioned this kind of slow start, and then towards the end, I kind of lost some steam there. And I certainly did get confused at times, like I mentioned, just with all these, with all the terminology and everything. And I think we just get a ton of ideas thrown at us, and it's pretty complex. So I think that this is the type of sci-fi where you kind of need to be paying close attention to, just to keep track of everything. The prose, I mean, it's fine. It's not super flowery or descriptive or anything like that. I mean, I don't really have anything negative to say about it, but I also don't have anything super positive to say about it. So it's fine. I think just in terms of, again, pacing and prose, it does read like a debut novel. And I do, however, think that this would make a very good show or movie. I don't know if the rights have been sold already, but I think that would be certainly very interesting to watch. So, while this was just kind of middle of the road for me, I do think that a lot of other readers will likely really enjoy this. I tend to be a little bit picky about my sci-fi, it seems, but I think that there's, some ideas and everything that other readers of sci-fi will enjoy. So now we move to the 3.5 star rating. And the first book I'll talk about here is The Deceivers by Kristen Simmons. So I'm just going to go ahead and say this up front. It's maybe a mild spoiler, but I feel like had I known this going into it, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. And what I'm about to say, I feel a bit silly for not picking up on this earlier. So that's I mean, in hindsight, it's incredibly obvious. But this is low-key a retelling of Odin, Valhalla, and the Valkyries. So this is the first book in Vale Hall. Again, Valhalla, basically. I don't know how I missed that. Our main character's name is basically very close to one of the Valkyries, so I don't know how I missed this, but yes. So I really like how that took inspiration from this. Basically, the premise here is that our main character, Bryn, her name is Bryn Hilder. She is essentially desperate to escape her kind of shitty rundown neighborhood, and is has been running cons in order to get money to go to college. She ends up being recruited to Vale Hall, which is kind of this school for con men. And so she's assigned to con a senator's son, and basically the son is hiding something, and she's kind of needs to figure out what it is. She ends up along the way feeling she kind of belongs with the other students, but it's a school for con men, so should she necessarily believe them? So this was a really fun idea, and I don't know, I just this whole school for con men was a really great idea, but it definitely went in a direction I didn't expect, and I don't know if I particularly like that, but I think, again, I mentioned, this low-key retelling thing, I think that just, that context makes me more inclined to like the direction that it went. But again, I didn't realize that until after I finished the book. There's certainly a lot more focus on the romance and just flirtation that I necessarily wanted. And I do enjoy a good romance, obviously, but this one, it just felt like I was getting really impatient. I was I'm just going to skim these sections because I just can't. I did really enjoy Bryn trying to make a way for herself in the world. I guess her means of doing so is maybe a little bit questionable, but it was enjoyable to read about, and I ultimately like that she's trying to be able to put herself through college. I also really enjoyed the friendships that developed with the other students along the way. It's obviously a school setting, so I always enjoy that in my books, but I feel like I kind of expected more emphasis on the students learning all these various cons and, just generally more emphasis on that since it's a school for con men. But, we did get a little bit of that, but I just wanted more. I thought it would be we would sit in with them on various classes and stuff like that, and that wasn't as much the case as I thought. So, I don't know. This was still pretty entertaining, and if, the premise sounds interesting to you, I did have a good time with it, so you might as well. The next 3.5 star book I'll talk about is Why the Last Man, Book 1, and this is by Brian K. Vaughn. Well, this was an interesting choice to read, during the current pandemic, but I did it. Basically what happens is that all male, like humans and just like animals and everything like that, all males die around the world. So society kind of ends up grinding to a halt, and women are trying to keep civilization together. However, Rorick, our main character, and his male pet monkey mysteriously survive, and they're kind of like the key to figuring out what happened with everything. Rorick wants to find his girlfriend, but kind of like his journey to do so ends up like leading them to a variety of places, we'll say. I really liked this concept. You know, obviously, like, in general, I am a fan of books that have some sort of infectious disease element, but, you know, that's perhaps not the best choice to read during the current global pandemic. I did find the main character, Rorick, to be a little annoying at times, but ultimately he is a good person, I thought. I really liked the side characters. There's 355, who's this, like, female government secret agent. There's a female doctor, who I thought was nice. There's an Israeli military person. I don't remember exactly what her rank was, but yeah, we have a whole bunch of like really interesting female side characters, so I liked seeing that. We also have these Amazons, who are this group of women who are basically like a gang. In terms of like the plot, I am not entirely clear about the cause of the disease. I don't think we're intended to find out what's going on in this particular volume, I guess, but you know, I'm certainly interested in learning more clues and just like continuing on with this story. The artwork itself is pretty nice. It's pretty enjoyable. I will say there's a little bit of derogatory language used throughout this, but overall I had a really good time with this and I'm interested in continuing it. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is Fate of the Fallen by Kade. So this is an adult fantasy book that's basically like Lord of the Rings, but if Frodo died immediately after leaving the Shire and Sam goes on without him. So we have this like prophecy of the chosen one, and you know, like this chosen one's supposed to defeat evil. But throughout the book, you know, people start thinking that surrendering to this evil just maybe is the best way to go and to survive. Like, our group of characters kind of need to decide and like figure out how to become heroes and survive. So I really liked this premise. Like, I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I really enjoyed reading this and like trying to figure out how, like, kind of like the parallels between this particular story and Lord of the Rings. And like, I think it doesn't obviously match up one-to-one with Lord of the Rings. Like, I think there's a lot of just like general inspiration and just from like classic high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, The Wheel of Time, things like that. I feel like that certainly helped me enjoy it overall. So our main character, Aslo, is a forester, and I kind of think of him as being like a combination of Samwise Gamgee and an Ent. So these foresters are kind of like tasked with, taking care of trees and forests, and you know, it's a very respectable position. And I just really enjoyed seeing how he was like, well, you know, I may as well try to do my best to save the world, even though I'm not the chosen one, because there's no one else who's going to do it. Like, I'm going to step in and attempt to save the world. He's really honorable, and I liked how he's not giving up. So I feel like he's, you know, like Sam, he's this like stalwart companion, you know. Then we have a variety of gods meddling in things, and there's like this Reaper who like ferries souls to the afterworld. So that got a little confusing at times, but like ultimately it was kind of interesting. The mages in this world end up kind of being kind of meh. Like, they're not like the Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, where, you know, he's like a real member of the Fellowship and like doing his part to save Middle Earth. Our mages are a little more questionable here, I would say. There's certainly a fun group of side characters. There's I think honestly my favorite side character was Dolt, who is the stupid but also maybe kind of smart horse. He was just highly entertaining for me. There's like this ex-mage healer girl, and then we also have the pair of thief boys, and I kind of thought these boys were like the Merry and Pippin of the world. There's kind of this interesting plot line with like a blight and just like tree things in general. So overall, I would say like the pacing is certainly a bit uneven. I definitely, like, it started off really strong and then I just kind of lost steam as I went. But I generally did enjoy it, and I, like, again, really just liked trying to find these parallels with Lord of the Rings. It's very much like a classic fantasy tone. So if that's something you're interested in, you know, like, I did enjoy my time with it. So now we move into the 4-star range. So the first book I'll talk about here is Pines by Blake Crouch, and I did a buddy read of this with Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative. So this is one of those books where it's really best to not know much going into it. So I'm going to kind of keep this a little bit short, I think, to not spoil anything for you. So basically, this is a very plot-driven book. If you want like a very fast-paced thriller, I mean, there's not the most character development, but if you just want something that's really action-packed, this is going to be it. So we have a Secret Service agent who goes to this town of Wayward Pines in Idaho in order to find 2 missing federal agents. Then he has a car crash and wakes up in this hospital in Wayward Pines without any of his things and is like trying to investigate. And along the way, things are just a little odd. So that's basically all I'm going to say about it, and I highly suggest not reading more into the synopsis because part of the delight, I guess, of this book is uncovering things as you go. I will say, like, I definitely had the sense that things were like a little bit off. And I did have some thoughts about where it was going. And some of those thoughts were like mildly accurate, but overall, the reveal was a surprise to me. There's lots of suspense. There's some like terrifying moments, and yeah, I'm just gonna like kind of leave it at that because it's really better not to know much. But I really recommend this if you've read any of Blake Crouch's other books like Dark Matter or Recursion. I would definitely suggest picking this one up. Leslie and I think, are going to read the 2nd and 3rd books whenever she gets her copies. So I'm very excited to keep going with this and just see what other crazy stuff is going on. So the next 4-star book I'll talk about is Little Wonders by Kate Rorick. So I won this in a giveaway as well from Goodreads, and it looks like it's already out. So this was the other contemporary book that I read that I enjoyed much more than Happy and You Know It. So basically the premise here is that we follow 2 moms. So one of them, Quinn, is this like Instagram perfect mom. And she kind of loses her shit on camera when her son refuses to wear his handmade Halloween costume at this parade for this Little Wonders like preschool. Then we have our other mom, Daisy, who is younger. She has recently moved from the West Coast to the East Coast. She has blue hair, tattoos, and she is the one who actually took this video. Now, this video ends up being uploaded to the internet and goes viral. So Daisy obviously like can't admit that she did the video and, you know, accidentally was the one who like caused it to become viral. Because she like already doesn't feel like she fits in, and admitting this would kind of like make her feel ostracized from the rest of these like parents at this particular preschool. Quinn and Daisy kind of end up bonding together when dealing with the Little Wonders Parents Association. So this was surprisingly great. Like, I didn't anticipate loving it as much as I did. I don't read a ton of contemporary, but this just like really worked for me. So Quinn, who's this like the Instagram perfect mom, she starts off being pretty unlikable. She like is kind of obsessive about like scheduling everything out and just like has to have everything be absolutely perfect. However, she had a really fantastic character arc. I ended up really liking her, so that was very nice to see this character development. Daisy, I just loved her from the start. She is pretty nerdy, you know, she loves Star Wars, she's a DM, she was a DM back in LA. I found her very relatable because, like, obviously I have other nerdy interests as well, like I'm a huge fan of Star Wars, but I also just related to her on the level of, like, moving from the West Coast to the East Coast, and just, like, the cultural differences. Like, I mean, Arizona, I guess is kind of, like, questionable whether or not that's West Coast, but it's certainly like Southwest. And then, you know, moving out to North Carolina, like, I definitely feel at times like I don't quite fit in, so I just thought that her struggles were just very relatable to my own personal experience. It's hard to see how like mean and standoffish and like passive aggressive people are towards her, because, you know, she has blue hair and is like considerably younger than the rest of them, and you know, they're honestly like pretty judgmental towards her. The writing in general was very humorous, and I thought that the situations described in it were pretty relatable. Like, even though I don't have kids myself, I feel like the situations here, like, I could still find them amusing, and I'm sure like people who actually have kids will find these even more amusing. There's certainly like a lot of themes about being true to yourself, and I just really loved this sort of storyline. So I would really recommend this. I thought that this was fantastic. It was a very nice break from, you know, again, this whole fantasy slump that I have going on. It was really nice to just like read something that was humorous and just something a little bit different. So if this sounds interesting to you, I would highly recommend it. I am certainly interested in exploring more books from this author. The next 4-star book I'll talk about is The Swap by Robyn Harding. So this comes out later in June. It looks like the 23rd. So I did win an advanced copy of this, again, through a Goodreads giveaway. So this is an adult thriller, and the premise here is basically that Lo, who is a lonely high schooler, idolizes Freya, who is like a formal social media influencer. And Freya has this pottery studio, and Lo and Freya end up becoming really close, even though they are like definitely different ages. Then we have a new character, Jamie, who moves into town, and she and Freya end up becoming best friends. Freya ends up suggesting one night that Freya and her husband and Jamie and her husband swap sexual partners. And what ends up happening is like Lo kind of uses this as a way to get revenge, because she just like release her resentment for Freya kind of blowing her off and to be better friends with Jamie. So this was really good. This is definitely a very fast-paced thriller. I certainly didn't predict everything that happened. So, you know, like in terms of thriller quality, there were definitely some surprises here that I enjoyed. In terms of the characters, I thought Jamie was probably the most likable of the group. I did feel a bit bad for Lo, because like, you know, she's very obviously like a loner and is wanting these connections with people, but there's certainly like some unhealthy relationships that develop here. And then Freya just kind of sucks. Like, never liked her. She is manipulative and just kind of a jerk, so not a fan of her. There are some content warnings here, I would say, just like abuse and unhealthy relationships in general. Lo's parents are polyamorous, so that was just interesting to kind of explore that and just see how like the family dynamics change because of that and how this affects Lo. I think this is set on an island, possibly in the Pacific Northwest. I don't entirely remember, but it's somewhere up there. I think somebody had moved from Canada or something like that. I definitely wanted to keep reading and figure out just where this book would lead me. So, you know, I've read The Arrangement by her and had a very similar experience with it. So if this premise sounds interesting to you, I would definitely suggest it. And finally, the last book I'll talk about today is also a 4-star read, and that's the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. So I want to give away of this as like an actual finished copy from Book Riot, so that was exciting. So this is, I would say, more of a horror book, but like it doesn't always feel like horror, but mostly like I feel like that's like the proper categorization for it. We have our main character, Patricia, and she, you know, like is taking care of her family. She's this homemaker. She joins this book club as a way to kind of like keep her sane. And this book club ends up, you know, discussing these various true crime books. One day she ends up getting attacked by one of her elderly neighbors. And this elderly neighbor's nephew kind of comes into the picture. Then we also have kids from the other side of town start going missing, but they're kind of written off by the police. Patricia kind of thinks that James, who is this nephew of her neighbor, may be a killer, but she's already invited him into her life. So that's like basically all I'll say about the premise. This was really interesting. Like, I think Grady Hendrix has some really cool ideas for his books. Like, I've read Horror Store by him, and that was kind of like it's set in basically like an IKEA, and the entire book is structured like an IKEA catalog, which is really neat. So this one, I feel like we have this like true crime structure where we have different sections that are kind of based on different true crime books and everything, and I feel like it really takes inspiration from some true crime stories, which was really interesting. There were a couple of scenes that were just like super hard for me to read, like, ugh, blah. I don't want to say what they are, but like, oh my god, I barely made it through one of them in particular, and I just like, it still just gives me like, shivers. I don't know. I will say, I don't think the ending was maybe as strong as I would have liked, but I did really enjoy this overall. Man, it is, I was just like honestly infuriated reading some of this book because Patricia, there's definitely like a good amount of gaslighting by Patricia's husband and some of the other men, and even other other characters in general gaslighting Patricia, and it just made me furious because like obviously we as the reader know what's going on and believe Patricia, but just like to read about how everybody's like discounting her opinions and being like, oh, you're just crazy, you're trying to get attention, things like that, like so mad. I was so mad. I really appreciated just kind of this discussion. Was like many of the book club members are kind of these homemakers, stay-at-home moms, and there's a good amount of discussion about just like their lives and kind of like how they feel that they're not necessarily appreciated for what they do. So I don't know, I enjoyed reading that. I think it's an interesting take on vampires. It's not the usual vampire depiction I think that you see elsewhere. I will say I don't feel like I was particularly scared ever. Like, I was kind of grossed out based on that one scene. I would say like at times this felt almost more like an urban fantasy or a thriller to me than like a full-on horror book. But overall, I love this general concept. Like, not only do I also live in the South, but, like I love to read. So just like everything about this premise was awesome. This does certainly touch on some dark themes like child predators, content warnings for attempted suicide, some rape, and just like general gore. So do be aware of that going into it. Like, despite this, I don't know what this title may make you think of, like it's definitely much darker than I anticipated. So I guess like in terms of that, it's more of like what I would expect from a horror versus a thriller perhaps. But yeah, I would definitely suggest this if this premise sounds interesting to you and these darker themes are not something that would bother you. I definitely had an enjoyable time with it, and this is the second book of his that I've read, and I'm certainly interested in trying some of his others out. Like my best friend's Exorcism is one that I think probably the most interested of his to read. So those are the 10 books that I'll be talking about today in my latest recent reads wrap up. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. For your question of the day, let's just say, do you enjoy books that kind of have this exploration of nerdy culture? And I don't know, I feel like the answer is likely yes, but I don't know what else to ask, so we'll just go with that. I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.